Well, if you've seen my first impression video, you already know that it came somewhat bent, somewhat off-center. It's not the kind of blade shape that's optimized for chopping, but it has enough blade presence that you can do it, and I would expect it to hold up. Well, let's see how it handles batoning. I'll go pretty far down where there's plenty of blade. I don't think it has changed from that. It does chop decently well, especially for the blade shape. It does seem solid when I flex it to straighten it back out, so that's good. And I don't hear anything moving, creaking or cracking or anything like that. So that's generally good. Well, the blade is still off quite a bit. I don't seem to be able to bend it much, which in a way is good, but it also means that straightening it back out is a bit of an issue. Wow, this is so dull. Look at that. I can't even get the bark off this. It's that dull. Wow. There we go. Well, I can scrape it off. I can't really cut it off. Okay, then. That is not ideal. At a very steep angle it cuts, but otherwise it doesn't really want to. That is certainly not ideal. And for light chopping, of course it's fine. If it couldn't handle that, that would be rather sad, wouldn't it? You know what? I want to throw the sucker, because that's usually one of the ways in which you can tell very quickly if there is some structural weakness. That's sunk in really nicely. Oh, it's a very acute point. So far, all good. That's some abusive testing right there. So I messed up the throw, it bounced off. And of course it landed right on a few rocks, because why wouldn't it? But it does not seem to have been damaged from that. Yeah, there's still the overall bend, which just ticks me off. Ooh. Well, it's doing it for sure, and it really buries itself in there. Okay. So the tip was a little damaged right there. very minor, not a problem. And it looks like everything is still, I mean, the tip is still straight. It's the overall set, but that's still okay. So it is performing pretty well so far. I was worried about the fact that it's only glued, but if it's good glue, then that does not have to be a problem. Oh man, the penetration on this is pretty impressive. Make your jokes. Wow, that's sunk in real nicely. Ew. Yeah, it looks a little different here, doesn't it? Ew. Not good. Now the botched throws, those are the real test, because that is hard on the knife. Oh, that looked painful. Okay, there's a bit of a click here. Does it mean something loosened up? That clicking. Ah, there it is. Okay, so the guard is now loose. Can't say I'm surprised with this sort of abuse. Now, what I'm doing here is definitely reducing its durability at a much faster pace than normal use would. So, all things considered, not too bad. Ugh. I hate when it smacks down on the rock. It's also funny that earlier today I said I'm tempted to throw at this, but I'm not going to because of all the rocks. No, I'm doing it anyway. Because I'm hardcore. Oh, that was so far the worst, I think. That was terrible. Smacked against it with the grip, and then it crashed down with the blade into a rock. The blade is still fine though. Oh yeah, I can definitely feel the guard is loose. Just the guard though. That's interesting. What in the... That was bizarre. Maybe one more throw and then I've tortured this thing enough. What do you think? Okay, so what do we have? A severely abused knife, that's for sure. I battered the guard enough with the botched throws when it smacked into the rocks that it was bent all the way up against the blade. At first glance, it doesn't even look wrong. This could be intentional, but I mean, it shouldn't be difficult to bend that back. Brass is soft after all. Speaking of which, there's also some damage to the brass here, where it scraped over the rocks. And the wood was banged up, which is to be expected. However, the only thing that happened was that the guard loosened up. I don't know if you can hear that, but you may be able to see it, or not. It's really minor. There it is. So you can feel it. There's something wobbling as you swing it around. It's not too bad. It's noticeable, but otherwise, I mean, I'm still not entirely sure if the initial bend got worse or not, because it was pretty off-center to begin with. So I'm actually not positive that the testing made that worse. A little bit, perhaps. Also worth noting that my attempts to straighten it out were apparently unsuccessful. It didn't really seem to do much, which, as said, is in this case not desirable, but overall it's good because it means that it's not going to bend easily on its own. I mean, this one here in particular, I bet, is just something that slipped through the cracks. As far as quality control is concerned, I do not imagine that they are all crooked. So if you get one that's straight, then that should be pretty decent. If you don't, you can of course always send it back. In my case, it didn't seem worth the shipping costs. So yeah, I have to say I was worried about it, but it does perform. I can't really fault it. I mean, the edge is bad. The edge is terrible, quite frankly. It's even worse than I initially thought. But I mean, it can be fixed, so it's not the end of the world. And the steel is obviously good. I mean, I guess the upside to it being fairly dull is that the edge got no damage at all, despite being smacked onto rocks and into sand and all of that, which is just poison for steel or any material really. But all things considered, it held up really well. So I can't really fault it for that. I know that a lot of you found it seriously ugly, and I mean, I guess I can get it to an extent. It does happen to appeal to my personal taste, but I can see why you would think it's a little weird looking and whatnot. But quality-wise, it seems good. Despite the glued handle, it stood the test of, well, not the test of time, the test of abuse, I suppose. What made this particularly abusive in my case was all the rocks around here. So it's just a matter of the environment. If you just have a backstop of some sort, and if you hit most of the time, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It performs, at least in terms of durability. As said, cutting performance is garbage at this point, but that's just a matter of refining the edge. So the blade itself is good. It's also reasonably thick. It, despite the crappy edge, it actually chops better than I thought, because you see there's really not a lot of mass here past this point, but it's still fairly decent actually. Batoning is not a problem. Not the best knife for it. So yeah, Mexican Bowie by Windlass, not bad. Whether or not the price is worth it, I'll leave that up to you. I think it's okay for what it is. I prefer if it was either a little better made, and I would personally prefer a steel guard over brass, even though that's more of an aesthetic consideration. Would be more functional to have steel here. And a few of the other things, the handle could be a little differently shaped, the guard could be decorated, would be nice. And I prefer if it was pinned instead of glued, but at the same time, it held up. So I can't really fault it for that. So seems pretty good. For, especially if it ever comes on sale, like for, I don't know, 40 bucks or so, I would definitely say snatch it up. At the regular price is not bad either. All right, thanks for watching, folks. Have a good one.